They said they were exhausted. 3 hours is a long drive. Maddie, your mom's back isn't great right now. We'll be watching the stream. We promise. That's what Dad told me when I called to confirm the seat count. Then Mom's voice came in, trying to sound soft, almost gentle. It's just been a draining month. Sweetie, your father's buried in reports. I've got 2 closings and an open house this weekend. We're just completely wiped out. I said okay. I didn't argue. But the next morning, they were on Instagram, clinking champagne glasses in monogrammed robes, soaking in a spa tub with my sister. And if you believe quiet stories deserve to be heard, tap like and subscribe. This one isn't loud, but it's true. It was the day before graduation, and the Oregon sun was relentless, sharp, blinding, the kind of heat that made everything feel heavier. My gown clung to the back of my legs as I rehearsed the walk from the tunnel to the podium. I moved when they told me to, nodded when the dean handed me a cream card with my name in gold lettering. Madeline Carter, it read. And just beneath that, valedictorian. You'll be seated here, the dean said, tapping one of the center stage folding chairs. And you've requested 3 seats in the family section. Yes, I nodded. Yes, 3. Even though by then, I already knew better. When rehearsal ended, I ducked under the bleachers for a moment of shade and silence. My phone buzzed against the side of my thigh. A new message from my mother had come in during the speech walkthrough. We're just too tired to make the trip. Sweetheart, you understand, right? We're so proud of you. Go enjoy your moment. We'll watch the stream. I stared at the screen, not angry, not even surprised. And then, stupidly, instinctively, I opened Instagram. Lila had posted a story 20 minutes earlier. She was holding a mimosa, feet soaking in rose petal water, her smile perfectly lit by the soft spa lighting. Mom sat beside her in a plush white robe, matching slippers on her feet, a gold mask drying on her face. The location tag floated across the top the Willow Spa. Silverfield. I tapped to the next frame, a boomerang of the 2 of them clinking glasses. Sometimes self-care means skipping the noise. The caption read, and underneath, in the comments, best day with my beautiful girl, Mom. Not a word about me. Not sorry. We'll miss it. Not that we're proud of you. Maddie. Just clinking glasses, steam, and curated joy. I didn't comment. I didn't reply. I closed the app. I walked back to the dorm, to the same desk I'd sat at 100 times. My valedictorian speech sat open. Final draft. Polished. Safe. Gratitude heavy. The kind of thing that fits nicely into a university newsletter. I stared at it for a long time. Then, slowly, I hit delete. The screen went blank. The room was still. The kind of quiet that almost hums. I didn't know yet what I wanted to say. I just knew. It couldn't be that. Not anymore. Because it wasn't just about the spa day. It was about everything that came before it. And something inside me had finally, quietly, split. The page on my laptop stayed blank. And in that stillness, memory crept in. Not the loud ones, not the moments that spark with confetti and laughter, but the quiet kind, the kind you almost forget, until something triggers them back into focus. I was 16. All I wanted for my birthday that year was dinner. Just the 4 of us. At the little Italian place downtown. Pasta, tiramisu. Nothing extravagant. Mom said they were too busy. A lot is going on at work. We'll celebrate at home. Sweetheart, she promised. And we did. That night, there was no music, no candles, just the kitchen lights and a box on the counter, wrapped in navy paper, tied neatly with twine. Inside was a leather-bound planner, tucked in the front flap, a folded note. For the future you're building. Love. Mom and Dad. It was practical, thoughtful, in its own way. I said, "Thank you." Even smiled for the photo, then helped Mom clear the dishes while Lila scrolled on her phone. I didn't cry, didn't expect more. And maybe that's the part that stuck with me longest. How easy it was to accept so little. A few months later, Lila turned 19. I came home from school to string lights twinkling in the backyard. A private chef stood behind silver trays. A cake shaped like a Chanel purse sat center stage next to a full karaoke setup. There was a flower crown on every plate. A photographer is circling the guests. Lila twirled in a new dress Mom had picked out. She laughed like the world had cracked open just for her. Dad held the camera like a red carpet paparazzo, snapping every smile, every pose, every tilt of her chin. Mom clapped and shouted over the music, "Look at our little star." They had never called me that. Not once. I stood by the sliding glass door, watching the scene from behind the glass. When I asked about it later, gently, cautiously, Mom tilted her head and gave me that smile, the one who said I was overthinking. "Oh, honey," she said, "you've never liked parties. You're our serious one, our focused girl." As if that was an answer. As if that explained everything. Maybe they were right. I didn't like being the center of attention. I read before bed instead of flipping through fashion magazines. I preferred quiet bookstores to rooftop brunches. And maybe, just maybe, I didn't sparkle the way Lila did, but that didn't mean I didn't want to be seen. So, I studied harder, wrote longer essays, took on more work. If I couldn't be the daughter they toasted, maybe I could be the one they quoted, the one they bragged about at dinner parties, the one they told neighbors, "She's going places," but they never did. There was always something more pressing. Lila's internship, Lila's modeling photos, Lila's allergies, travel plans, and new haircut. And I became background music, reliable, quiet, a melody they didn't notice until it stopped playing. Now, years later, as I stared at that blank page, I realized the spa trip wasn't the betrayal. It was just the echo of all the birthdays, all the dinners, all the empty seats that came before it. It was the confirmation of a truth I had spent too long avoiding. They had chosen their star, and I had learned how to disappear gracefully. But that day, the day before graduation, I wasn't interested in disappearing anymore. After that night, the night of the Chanel cake and flower crowns, something shifted. Not loud, not dramatic, just quieter. I stopped asking for things, stopped mentioning birthdays, stopped hoping someone would notice. Instead, I poured it all into school. Extra credit, debate team, office hours. If there was a deadline, I beat it. If there was a class curve, I set it. It wasn't about the gold stars. Not really. It was about becoming undeniable. About building a version of myself that couldn't be ignored. Because if I couldn't be the daughter they celebrated, maybe I could be the one they respected. I imagined them. Years later, at some neighbor's barbecue. Oh, Lila's doing a shoot in LA. And Madeline. Oh, she graduated top of her class. Full ride. She's publishing now. But that daydream never made it past my own head. Because in reality, those conversations never happened. Not at Thanksgiving, not on the porch during summer, not even on the nights I came home holding awards. They never asked about. Once, during my junior year of high school, I won a national essay competition. It was printed in a regional magazine. My name, my words, page 5. I left the issue on the kitchen counter, right next to the fruit bowl. No one said anything. But 2 days later, Mom texted a photo of Lila in a denim jumpsuit. Her caption read, "Doesn't she look like a model already?" And maybe she did. But for once, I wanted someone to say, Madeline looks like she's going somewhere. Instead, I became the family's invisible resume, a list of accomplishments no one ever read out loud. At school, I learned how to shrink my pride into quiet nods, learned how to smile when people asked, "Your family must be so proud." And I always said yes, even when I wasn't sure. They remembered what I was studying, but I kept going. I stayed up late proofreading essays in a windowless back room while Lila posted yacht photos from Santorini. I spent spring breaks interning in tiny offices with flickering lights and cheap coffee. I memorized formulas on the bus, listened to audiobooks while I cooked. I built a whole life on discipline. Not because it was fun, but because it was the only thing I could control. And in all that silence, I started to realize something else. It wasn't just about becoming someone impressive, it was about survival. Because if I stopped achieving, who would I be to them? Just the quiet one, the background, the girl who didn't sparkle, the daughter who didn't ask for much. So I gave them what I thought they wanted: good grades, clean transcripts, no drama, no heartbreak, no surprises. And still, they never said my name the way they said hers. They never told her, "Be more like Madeline." But they told me, "Why don't you come out of your shell like Lila?" As if quiet was a flaw. As if care and control and quiet strength weren't their own kind of power. Looking back now, I see it clearly. Those years weren't just about trying to make them proud. They were about trying to matter. Trying to become someone they would talk about when I wasn't in the room. But they didn't. And somewhere along the way, I stopped waiting for that moment. Because sometimes the only way to be seen is to stop asking for it. 3 weeks before graduation, I got the email. Subject line: valedictorian announcement confirmed. I was sitting in the corner booth of the campus cafe, the one near the window where the sun always hit just right. I blinked at the screen, once, twice, then read the words again. It was real. Me, Madeline Carter, top of the class. 4 years of skipped breaks, sleepless nights, and early mornings spent rewriting papers until the sky turned pale. And now, this. I picked up my phone and called home, hands still trembling. Mom answered on the third ring. HGTV hummed in the background. She sounded half distracted. "Oh hey, sweetie," she said. "Hang on. These kitchen cabinets are hideous. Don't you think dark green is too much?" I waited, then said it, soft but certain. "Mom, I got it. I'm valedictorian." There was a pause. Just half a beat too long. "That's nice, sweetheart," she replied. "So that means..." "What, exactly?" "Like, you have the highest grades." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Yes, I'll be giving the speech." "Right. Right. That's great," she said, already shifting. "You always were our little bookworm." And then, like flipping a switch. "Did I tell you Lila's stylist might be doing a shoot in Miami? It could be big." One of her Instagram reels got featured by a brand last week. Can you believe that I didn't interrupt? Didn't mention the GPA? Didn't talk about the speech I'd be writing? The spotlight I'd step into? When I brought up the ceremony, told her the exact date, she laughed. "Oh, honey, don't go fancy with us," she said. "Just send a text." But I didn't want to send a text. I wanted something they couldn't swipe past, couldn't ignore, something that felt like it mattered. So the next day, I walked to a little stationery shop 2 blocks from campus. I picked the thickest ivory paper they had, hand-cut, deckled edges. I bought a gold ink pen, the kind I used to practice with when I taught myself calligraphy in middle school. That night, I sat at my desk and wrote out each name slowly, carefully. Mom, Dad, Lila. No smudges, no typos. Inside each card, "It would mean the world to me if you were there." That weekend, I made the drive home, 3 hours across Oregon highways that felt longer than ever. I waited until after dinner. After Lila finished her story about brunch with someone important. After Dad opened his second bottle of wine. Then I reached into my bag and placed the envelopes on the table, one by one. Dad raised an eyebrow. "You drove all this way? Just for these?" Mom opened hers. Her eyes scanned the curve of the letters. "Oh, sweetie," she said, half smiling. "You used the gold pen with the curly E's. Just like when you were 10. She passed it to Lila. "Look, isn't that cute?" Lila glanced, said, "Pretty," then went back to her phone. No one asked what I'd be speaking about. No one asked how it felt. After all this time, to be standing at the top. I stayed to clear the dishes. The kitchen was quiet, except for the sound of forks scraping porcelain. Like always. I washed. Like always. No one looked up. And in that silence, I felt it again. That ache beneath the ribs. Not anger. Not even disappointment. Just a familiar knowing. The kind that reminds you. Some things won't ever be different. The night before graduation, I couldn't sleep. I had gone through the checklist 3 times. Speech printed, gown ironed, shoes polished and set by the door. Everything was in order. Everything but me. The air in the dorm was still, almost too still. I lay on top of the covers, phone face up on the pillow beside me, half hoping it would light up. A message, a call, something, anything. Not because I needed praise, not even acknowledgement, just a moment of softness. A sliver of effort. At 2:03 a.m., I gave up and reached for my phone. Maybe a friend had messaged. Maybe Kayla had sent a meme, or Drew had dropped one of his sarcastic late-night voice notes. But what I saw instead, what waited for me, was Lila's story. I tapped before I could stop myself. And there it was. Again. She was reclining in a white spa chair, cucumber slices over her eyes, champagne in hand. The caption said, "Self-care before the summer chaos." In the next frame, Mom was beside her, mid-laugh, grinning under a hydrating gold face mask. Both of them wore matching robes, embroidered with the Willow Spa, VIP suite. In the photo that followed, Lila was resting her head on Mom's shoulder, their smiles soft and staged, like something out of a luxury ad campaign. And underneath, in the comments, Mom had written, "Best day with my star girl. Not a single mention of me. Not so proud of Maddie. Not can't wait to watch the live stream tomorrow. Nothing. Just steam, filtered light, and curated affection." For a long moment, I didn't move. The phone stayed lit in my hand, screen still glowing. I wasn't angry. I was past that. What I felt was something colder, deeper, a hollow understanding that this wasn't an oversight. It was a choice. My fingers moved on their own. I opened our message thread. I typed, "Saw your stories. Thought Mom and Dad were too tired to travel." 10 minutes later, Lila replied, "Don't be sensitive. This was planned weeks ago. You'll be fine." That was it. 3 sentences. That was the sum total of their explanation. No apology, no acknowledgement, no space for hurt. I placed the phone face down, then picked it up, then placed it down again. On my desk. The folder with my speech sat where I'd left it. The one I had rewritten after that first message, filled with cautious lines, phrases crafted to sound grateful, to make sure no one felt uncomfortable. I opened it and read the first paragraph. Then I hit delete. Because this wasn't going to be the speech where I pretended they were there, where I said thank you just because that's what's expected. They were too tired for me, but not too tired for spa treatments and champagne, too drained for a 3-hour drive, but not for selfies and silk robes, and I was done writing for them. So I opened a new document. I stared at the blinking cursor for a long time, then typed the first words that had lived in me for years, but had never found a way out. This is not a thank you. I wrote slowly at first, then faster. The words came like breath, like blood returning to frozen limbs. Not out of anger, not even spite, but the truth. I wrote for the girl who celebrated every small win alone, for the student who turned down trips to stay ahead, for the young woman who learned to stop asking for applause and started building without it. The speech didn't begin with, "To my wonderful family." It began with, "To those who showed up, even when no one clapped. This is for you." And for the first time in a long, long while, I didn't feel invisible. I felt clear. When I finally looked up, the sky outside had begun to lighten. A thin line of dawn stretched across the horizon. I printed the speech on plain white paper, folded it in half, and tucked it into the folder. Then I placed the original version, the one they might have expected, right behind it, just in case I lost my nerve. But deep down, I already knew I wouldn't. By the time the sun cracked the sky, the new speech was done. It sat in my hands, 7 pages, printed in black ink on plain white paper. No decorative borders, no school crest, no flourish, just the truth. It didn't open with gratitude. There was no carefully phrased, "Thank you to my family for believing in me," because they hadn't. Not in the way that counted. Not in the quiet moments when it would have mattered most. Not when I stayed late for office hours, or skipped spring break to catch up on research, or called home just to share a small victory and got silence in return. And so I wrote the only way I knew how. Not to be polite, not to be proper, but to be honest. The new speech began with a sentence that had lived inside me for years. To those who showed up, even when no one noticed, this is for you. And every word after that was a thread pulled from my own history. I wrote for the girl who learned how to cheer for herself in empty rooms, for the student who memorized lectures on buses and edited papers between shifts, for the young woman who never saw her name framed on a wall, but still kept going. I wrote for people like me, the ones who didn't get birthday cakes shaped like designer handbags or gold-lettered captions from parents, the ones who never got called a star, but burned bright anyway. This wasn't a speech for applause. It wasn't dressed in safe metaphors or polished lines made for social media clips. It was quiet, intentional. A slow-building truth meant for those who had survived the long, invisible miles. I remembered every time I looked out from behind the glass door while Lila twirled under string lights. Every time I watched my parents beam with pride. That never seemed to reach me. And I let those memories guide my pen, not to shame, but to clarify. I wrote slowly, but not cautiously. Each sentence was a decision, each pause, a breath I'd held for years finally released. There were no accusations, no names, just a gentle unveiling of what it means to be present when no one asks you to be. I talked about professors who answered emails late into the night, friends who dropped off soup during flu season without needing thanks, classmates who held space for one another when life got heavy. That kind of showing up, the kind that doesn't sparkle but saves you all the same. I ended the speech with a truth I hadn't said out loud until that morning. Some of us weren't born into applause. Some of us had to earn it in silence. But we made it here, and that matters. Then I folded the pages, slid them into the folder beside the original version, the one that started with, "To my loving family," and closed the clasp. I knew I wouldn't use the old one. Not anymore. But I kept it there anyway, not as a backup, as a reminder of what I was choosing to leave behind. The sun rose quietly outside my window, painting the walls gold. I didn't feel nervous. I felt awake, clear, as if all the years I had tried to be chosen by them no longer owned me. I wasn't writing for their approval. I was writing for the version of myself who had waited by the phone, who had read their silences like scripture, who had hoped. This version, mourning, she no longer needed their permission to speak. By 7:15 a.m., I was dressed. The gown hung perfectly from my shoulders, ironed smooth from the night before. My shoes were quiet on the tile as I moved around the room, each motion deliberate. I had barely slept, but I wasn't tired. I was something else. Centered, steady, the kind of calm that comes after telling the truth. Outside, Kayla was already waiting, holding 2 coffees and a crumpled paper bag. "Muffin emergency," she said, handing me the one without blueberries. She remembered I hated them. Drew pulled up minutes later, a sunflower bouquet sticking out from the passenger window. He didn't say much, just gave me a quiet nod, his eyes saying more than words ever could. It was enough. We drove in near silence, windows cracked just enough to let in the soft Oregon morning air. The roads were still, the city not yet awake. My fingers stayed clenched around the folder resting in my lap. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I already knew which speech I'd deliver. When we arrived at the field, rows of metal chairs were already lined up in perfect symmetry, white programs fluttering slightly in the breeze. A few families were trickling in, hugging each other tightly, adjusting ties, wiping proud tears. Volunteers walked the aisles with clipboards. And at the very front, taped to 3 chairs in the center of the reserved section, were 3 simple signs: Carter family. No one had touched them. No one ever would. I looked at those chairs only once, long enough to register the emptiness, long enough to make peace with it. Then I looked away, because there was no room in me for second glances. Not today. Kayla squeezed my hand and disappeared into the crowd. Drew gave my shoulder a small tap before joining her. And then, it was just me. A volunteer with a headset led me behind the stage, down a narrow path lined with folding tables and floral centerpieces. The dean was already mic'd up and smiling. "Ready?" she asked. I nodded. Not the kind of nod people give when they're just being polite. The kind that means, I know who I am now, and I'm not looking back. We stood in silence as names were announced, feet shifting behind the curtain, nervous fingers adjusting tassels. I could hear cheers from the crowd, sharp, loud, filled with pride. But they weren't for me. Not yet. Then, the moment came. Valedictorian. Madeline Carter. The applause began. It grew louder, folding in on itself, echoing across the field. But I didn't hear it. Not really. I was already walking, already focused. My steps were sure, my hands steady on the folder. When I reached the podium, I paused only once, not to glance at the audience, not to find a familiar face, but to look directly into the livestream camera, because I knew they were watching, wherever they were. Mom on the couch, Lila half listening while checking her phone. I knew they were there, not in the seats they were supposed to fill, but on the other side of the screen. And this time, they didn't get to look away. I adjusted the mic. The paper in my hand didn't shake. And when I finally spoke, it wasn't for them. It was for everyone who had ever earned their moment without witnesses. For everyone who had ever been told they were too serious, too quiet, too much, or not enough. My voice, clear and certain, cut through the morning like sunlight over water. And I began. The mic was warm beneath my fingertips. The breeze brushed lightly across the paper as I unfolded it. Careful, deliberate. For a moment, I stood in stillness, letting the applause fade. I didn't smile. I didn't scan the crowd. I looked straight into the camera, and I began To those who showed up, even when no one clapped, this is for you. There was a pause, soft but intentional. The field quieted, as if the audience sensed this would not be the kind of speech they were used to. My voice didn't waver. I had lived inside these words long before they reached the page. To the ones who stayed late, asked questions, cleaned up, and checked in. To the friends who sat with us in silence, and the mentors who made space for us without demanding anything in return. To the students who studied in stairwells and skipped breaks, not because they were told to, but because they believed in something bigger. I see you. Heads began to tilt forward, eyes focused. There were no platitudes, no sugarcoating, just a slow, steady unspooling of truth. Quiet strength acknowledged out loud. Some of us didn't have balloons tied to our mailboxes. Some of us didn't have parties or posters or Facebook announcements. Some of us earned this moment in complete silence. And I want you to know, it still counts. A rustle passed through the crowd, faint but unmistakable. People shifted in their seats. Parents looked sideways. Professors nodded, some almost imperceptibly. They knew. They understood. I didn't call out names. I didn't have to. The weight of what was unspoken sat gently on every sentence. These weren't veiled attacks. They were acknowledgments for all the people who had walked long roads with no witnesses. Graduation isn't just about achievement. I said, it's about being seen. Because there's a difference between making it and being seen making it. I let that sit for a second longer. My gaze didn't drop. I didn't shrink. For the first time in years, I wasn't editing myself to make someone else comfortable. And then, I said it. Calmly. Clearly. I requested 3 seats in the family section. I looked toward the front row. They're still available. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was thick, tangible. A collective intake of breath that no one released. Someone coughed near the back. The sound echoed sharply than it should have. A few heads turned, but I didn't flinch. I stood still in it, unchanged, unwavering. If you've ever walked across a finish line with no one waiting on the other side, let me be the first to say, you did it. It matters. You matter. I saw Kayla in the second row, her eyes brimming. Drew gave a low nod, the corner of his mouth tight with something that wasn't quite a smile. Somewhere behind me, the president of the university shifted in her chair, but didn't interrupt. Some of us were taught that love has conditions, that pride has prerequisites, that you have to shine just right to be celebrated. But you don't. You don't have to prove your worthiness to earn your place. Not here, not today. A girl near the front wiped her cheek with her sleeve. A faculty member leaned forward, elbows on knees, listening like the words weren't just mine anymore. So if today, you walked this stage for yourself, because no one else pushed you, no one else noticed, no one else clapped, this moment is still yours. We made it. And we made it, honestly. I folded the paper. The applause didn't come right away. It started slowly, almost cautiously. Then it grew, louder than I expected, fuller, real. But I wasn't listening for that, because I wasn't writing for it. Somewhere, behind a glowing screen, they were watching. And this time, they didn't get to frame the moment. They didn't get to interrupt, or spin, or soften what had been said. They just had to sit with it. And I had finally said what needed saying, after the ceremony. I didn't go out to brunch like most of my classmates. I didn't take cap and gown selfies in front of the library or stop by the alumni booth for free merch. I walked back to my dorm in the same quiet I had carried with me for years. Not sad, not triumphant, just whole. The gown was still on me when I unlocked the door. I didn't bother turning on the lights. The sun was high enough now to fill the room with that soft, dappled glow that made everything feel like it had been paused in amber. I stepped out of my shoes, set the folder on my desk, and then walked over to the drawer I hadn't opened in months. It stuck a little, like always, but I pulled until it gave. Inside, beneath a stack of pens, old receipts, and a cracked phone charger, was the envelope, a little worn around the edges. No return address. Just one word, written in familiar handwriting. Madeline. My father's script, slightly slanted, careful, with that signature loop on the lowercase e. He had given it to me 3 years ago, the day I got accepted into university. We'd gone for pancakes, just the two of us, which even then had felt rare. As we finished the last of our coffee, he slid the envelope across the table like it was nothing. Just something I wanted you to have, he'd said. I didn't open it until I got back to my room. I'd read it once, folded it neatly, and tucked it away. But now, it felt different. Now, it felt necessary. I sat down slowly, gown still rustling beneath me, and opened the envelope like it might dissolve in my hands. Madeline, you always carry more than you let on. I see it. I hope you never forget that your quiet strength is still strength. You've earned everything coming to you, no matter where you go. Don't let anyone make you small just to feel seen. You already are. Love. Dad. That was it. No long paragraphs. No stories. Just one page. One voice. One truth. And somehow, it was the only time I'd ever felt fully visible in this family. He'd never read the letter aloud. Never brought it up again. It wasn't framed in the hallway. It wasn't posted online with a caption. No one had asked about it. But it existed. And for years, I had wondered if I had imagined it, if maybe I had dreamed the moment, misread the words, projected meaning onto something that wasn't really there. But I hadn't. It was real. The loop on the E was real. The weight of the paper was real. His name, signed in the bottom right corner, R, was real. He had seen me. Maybe not always. Maybe not enough. But at least once. He had. And in a house where silence had always echoed louder than applause. That letter was the only thing that ever broke through. I held it like it was something fragile, something worth more than any trophy or title. Because it was. It hadn't come with a spotlight or a speech. It had no audience. It wasn't performative. It was quiet, and tucked away, and almost forgotten. But that didn't make it meaningless. It made it mine. In that moment, I understood something I hadn't before. Recognition doesn't always look like confetti. Sometimes, it's a single folded page at the back of a drawer. Sometimes, it's a few lines written in a diner while the coffee goes cold. Sometimes, it's the one thing you carry when everything else fades. The letter was still in my hand when my phone buzzed. Once, then again. Then, I set the envelope down gently, slid the drawer shut, and picked up the phone without urgency. I already knew who it would be. The first message was from Mom. We watched the stream. Your speech was, well, unexpected, but powerful. Call us when you get a moment. Okay. No punctuation after powerful. Just space. Just the kind of vague compliment you give when you don't know how to name what you heard. There was no mention of the empty seats. No. I'm sorry. No. We should have been there. Only a gentle nudge toward conversation. As if everything could be smoothed over with a phone call. As if a missed milestone could be softened by tone. The second message came from Lila. Congrats, valedictorian. I didn't know you were feeling all that. Don't be so dramatic next time. 3 sentences, 1 backhanded congratulations, 1 deflection, 1 command. I stared at her message longer than I meant to, not because I didn't expect it, but because of some small, flickering part of me, still too soft, had hoped for something more. Not an apology. I'd stopped needing those years ago. Just something real. Something that sounded like her listening, not dismissing. But it wasn't there. And for once, I didn't chase it. I didn't type out a measured reply, didn't weigh words or soften edges. I didn't reply at all. Because I didn't need to. That was the difference. There had been a time, years of it, when I would have responded immediately, when I would have tried to explain the speech, to justify the clarity it carried, to protect them from feeling implicated in a story they helped write. I would have smoothed the silence, filled it with reassurances, offered versions of the truth that sounded more digestible. But not this time. This time, the silence belonged to me. I placed the phone screen down and let the quiet settle. It wasn't bitter. It wasn't even sad. It was full of something I hadn't known I could feel in their absence. Peace. Because they had missed it. Not just the ceremony. Not just the walk or the applause or the lines I had written in the dark. They had missed the becoming, the work, the stillness, the breaking, the rebuilding. And now that it was complete, they couldn't take it. Not with a message, not with a phone call, not with their late attention or tidy half compliments. What I had earned that day wasn't a degree, or a title, or even the audience. It was myself. That self no longer needed to be interpreted through their eyes, no longer needed to be evaluated for worthiness. She simply was. And they could not undo that. Not with words, not with silence, not anymore. 3 weeks later, I moved to Portland. The job offer had come in a month before graduation, a copywriting position for a digital magazine focused on women-led ventures. I said yes the same day, no hesitation, no second guessing. It felt like a door I didn't have to knock on. It simply opened. My new apartment was on the top floor of an aging brick building with creaky floors and crooked windows. The sink dripped. The radiator clanged. The bedroom barely fit a full-sized mattress. But when the morning light poured in, just for 15 golden minutes, it felt like mine. Every inch of it. There were no framed quotes on the wall, no family photos on the fridge, no inherited dishes or handed-down linens. Everything inside had been chosen. By me. For me. The first night. I sat cross-legged on the hardwood floor with takeout dumplings and a glass of wine. No TV, no phone. Just the hum of the city through thin windows and the steady beat of my own breathing. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But it felt like arrival. I didn't call my parents. Not out of anger. Not even out of pride. I just didn't feel the pull. That invisible string I used to stretch across time zones and silences. It had loosened. And in its place was something steadier, quieter, my own rhythm. Every morning, I walked 5 blocks to the magazine office, an airy space tucked above a plant shop on Alberta Street. The walls were lined with books and whiteboards and half-drunk coffee mugs. The team was small, all women, all sharp and warm in equal measure. They didn't care about where I came from, only about what I could build. And I did build. I wrote about resilience, about ambition, about the quiet tenacity of women who had built empires from nothing but stubborn hope. I told stories that didn't beg for sympathy, only recognition. And somehow, writing those pieces, day after day, became a kind of therapy I hadn't known I needed. Kayla visited on my first weekend. She brought plants and snacks and 2 mismatched mugs from her own cabinet. Drew sent a postcard from Denver with only 3 words on it. Keep burning quietly. I pinned it to the fridge. I still had the letter from my father, tucked in the back of a drawer beside a pack of sticky notes and an old student ID. I didn't reread it often, but I liked knowing it was there. Proof that someone had seen me once, and that even if they never saw me again, I had learned how to see myself. I walked to work most days, sometimes with music, sometimes just with thoughts. No one called me the serious one anymore. No one asked me to smile more. I was just Madeline, not the background, not the shadow, just a woman in a new city, finding her shape in the world. It was a soft beginning, one not marked by fanfare or confetti, but every small decision felt like reclamation. The grocery list on the counter, the calendar on the fridge, the stack of books I'd finally started reading just for pleasure. It all said the same thing. You're here now. You belong to yourself. And I did. 2 weeks into the new job, I got a message from Lila. It was short, no emojis, no filters. Just a sentence that felt like a question disguised as an invitation. Want to grab lunch? I'll be in the city. I stared at it for a while. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because, for once, I didn't feel the weight of expectation behind her words. No strings, no obligations, just two people, maybe sisters, maybe strangers, meeting in the middle of something unfinished. We met at Pinewood Cafe on a Thursday, neutral territory. Sunlight spilled across the tile floors, and the scent of roasted coffee lingered between us like a truce. She wore a linen blazer, understated makeup, the kind of ease that used to intimidate me. I wore the same navy dress I'd worn on my first day of work, simple, clean, mine. We didn't talk about mom. We didn't talk about the spa, or the live stream, or the words I'd said into that microphone. Instead, we talked about Portland weather, rent prices, and cheap laundry machines. We laughed about how adult conversations sneak up on you, how strange it feels to pay for Wi-Fi and still forget to call the dentist. It wasn't emotional, it wasn't cathartic, but it was honest. And that was enough. When we said goodbye, she didn't hug me, but her eyes lingered for just a second longer than they used to. Not with guilt, not with apology, just a quiet curiosity, like she had seen something new in me and didn't quite know how to name it. That night, I walked home past a flower stand on Hawthorne. A small bouquet caught my eye, yellow tulips and baby's breath, a little uneven, a little perfect. I bought it without thinking. No occasion, no audience. Back in my apartment, I set it on the kitchen table, poured a glass of water, and lit a candle I had been saving for no reason in particular. Then I propped up my phone, set the timer, and took a photo. Just me, sitting at the table, smiling, the flowers in frame. No one was tagged, no one commented, no one replied. So proud of our girl. And I didn't need them to, because for the first time, the photo didn't have to be approved. It didn't have to be framed or posted or seen to matter. It belonged to me. And this time, I didn't wonder if I was enough. I already knew. If this story stayed with you, let it speak. Leave a comment, tap like, and subscribe for more quiet stories that hit deep, because sometimes the softest voice tells the strongest truth.